Welcome, everybody, to the Professionally Evil Perspective. I'm Nathan Sweeney.
I'm Kevin Johnson.
You're giggling, man. I
I
love
am.
making you giggle.
Companies are stupid. I'm giggling about the podcast that I just got. What did you call it?
De-invited to?
Disinvited. I got asked to be interviewed on a podcast, and I'm like, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. And they came back and they said, hey, by the way, before we schedule this, and I'm paraphrasing, right, obviously, and they're like, before we schedule it, we want to make sure that when you tell us the stories about hacking, because that's what they wanted. They wanted hackers.
Sure, that's what everybody wants.
Stories. Yeah. And they're like, when you tell us the stories, you're going to name the companies you're talking about, right? And I'm like, no.
I mean, unless one of them is you and you give me permission.
I still think, I said this and you laughed, but I think it's a good idea. I'm willing to offer them a free pen test, but we won't deliver a report. We'll just go on the show and live reveal all the details.
Reveal their vulnerability.
Right? Because it's like I wrote back to him and I'm like, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, because it feels like you're saying, hey, could you come on and say, hey, when I was hacking Bank of America. And I say that one because I worked as a pen tester at Bank of America. My resume is public, right?
Right.
And their answer was, yeah. Like, if you can't do that, we're not going to have you on. And I'm like, never mind.
So why would companies care though? Like it's not like there's reputational harm in having had vulnerabilities.
Damn it. I didn't even see where that was going. You brought that right into the topic for today. That was awesome.
That's smooth.
That was well played. And for anybody listening right now, the three people, Mom. And it's like whoever you are, that wasn't set up. Nathan totally got me there. Like that was good.
So we've talked about this. We've talked around this a little bit in the past, but the idea of reputational harm, that's something we talk about all the time when we talk about business risk and how bad could something be? What if there's a compromise, a breach, etc. You always have to consider the magical reputational harm.
The magical. I think that's a good way to put it. The
mystical. Mystical. I like mystical better because
mystical's good. Mystical good.
It's not mythical. Mythical assumes that it's not really there. Mystical is like, we think there's something here, but we can't point to exactly what it is or where it is. And I don't know. What's your opinion? How do we quantify reputational harm?
I think the word you're looking for is the lazy approach, right? Like, in most cases, and I because all absolutes are false, right? But in most cases that I've seen that a pen tester or a security person says, reputational harm, what they mean is, I don't really understand the risk this could do. And so I've gone to this easy one that you can't prove me wrong and I can't prove me right. And I said almost, right? There are absolutely times that it might be true.
Sure.
But I see it all the time, right? And my response has always been, when's the last time you shot the target? Right. How many people still live in South Carolina? Right? Is the NSA still our country's thing? This is not. I often tell this story. I was, and I think you've heard me tell it. And if you haven't, you will totally see me doing this. I was teaching a class, and we talked about reputational harm. Somebody brought it up as like, what do you think about this, Kevin? And I said the same thing I always say. It is almost always a lazy answer.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't mean, right? And this guy in class said, oh, no, my company absolutely has researched this. And if we got hacked, it would harm our reputation and it would be bad. And I'm like, man, I'd love to hear the details of that, because I don't like, you're telling me your biggest, because he was like, the biggest risk to my company is reputational harm. Right. And I'm like, okay, I'll bite. Where do you work? And the dude said he worked at Comcast. And that was my reaction. I literally laughed out loud. It's a good thing I didn't have to pee, because I would have peed myself. I was laughing so hard. And then I stopped. I said, no, seriously. And he went, no, I do. And he was like offended, right? Like, he's like, I'm like, look, I'm a Comcast subscriber. I hope you get hacked. They'll run your network better. I
Like, how could you be maybe his concern is that the reputation would go up.
That might be like,
Maybe
isn't
maybe that's how they
Comcast?
justify part of their business model is keeping their reputation so low to begin with.
There's a good point. There's a good point, because I believe that they are literally the most hated company according to all the surveys I've ever seen.
That would not surprise
But
me.
yeah, oh man,
That's
I won't say what I normally say when I'm on a call with tech support at Comcast, and I my Comcast modem got hit by lightning and was like would not power up, and at least a dozen times through the process of trying to get I went to the store and bought a modem. That was easier,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And at least a dozen times in the steps of trying to get them to activate, like to allow the new modem on my account, they insisted that I had to let them test the current modem. And when they could not reach it, because it had let the magic smoke out,
right.
um, they they insisted that I needed to plug it in.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you more. We
it's
had a lightning strike on the house. We've lost multiple pieces of equipment, and the modem is one of them. But somehow your modem is magic.
right.
But reputational harm. Jumping back, so it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just a rant against Comcast, which I could do for hours. Reputational harm. I I think there are certain cases where reputational harm is real.
Mhm.
But what I would challenge people to do is that if they are looking at something saying we have to fix this because of reputational harm, I want them to quantify it.
Yeah,
And maybe no, not quantify might not be the right word, but I don't mean tell me how much harm you're getting. I want you to explain to me why this thing that happens
sure.
is actually going to impact, not just, well, if we get hacked and they get our data, it'll be bad. But
Right.
tell me, what of your customers, why would they change their opinion of you because
Yeah.
of this? Explain the process, right? Like that's my challenge to people when they say this.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of a gas station. I grew up in a small town. There was a gas station that rumors started going around that they had water in the tanks because they were really old, and that if you bought gas at that station, it would destroy your car, right? Destroy your engine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and eventually that caused. I mean, you can't say that that completely made them go out of business.
Right. Right.
That was a known thing that significantly dropped their revenue, and eventually they went out of business.
Yeah.
I think that kind of stuff happens, and,
I,
and that
I agree with that.
that's very clearly a reputational harm issue. But I don't know that there's any possible way you could foresee that thing happening, and then plan against it.
Yeah. I will also say that that type of rumor is different. Well, it's a great example, in
Mhm.
my opinion, because that is the type of reputational harm that will hurt somebody. Look,
Yeah,
there's a rumor. It's the same thing as like, oh, did you hear that guy's cheating on his wife? Right? Like that kind of
right.
thing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the type of reputation that can be harmed that way. But what we're talking about, I believe, and you're the one who came up with the topic, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about oh man, we have this vulnerability, and if it gets exploited, the biggest risk is reputational harm, and that's where I doubt it, right?
So I don't know that they're that different, and here's why. In both cases, you don't know for sure what's going to trigger society, social media. What like you don't know what's going to trigger that. What's it called when that going viral, right?
Right, right,
I don't know that there's any way to quantify it. Like you have to consider that it's a possibility, right? This type of compromise, this exploit, this whatever. If this goes public, it's possible that that could go viral and lead towards the type of reputational harm that I'm talking about.
yeah.
But I don't think.
but but I would argue back, if we're going with if it's possible as a reason we should fix things. You know what else is possible? We'll go back to my story about when we were decommissioning servers at Blue Cross, right? And we were moving from one data center to a new data center. We had this problem where our data center was on the 8th floor of the building, and we overloaded it, right?
Yeah,
Like it got to a point where it was like, okay, you can only have 2 technicians in there at one time, right? Like that kind of
I
thing. And
remember
yes, I will point out I'm naming another company I worked with, right? I And we moved to a new data center, right? And as we were moving to the data center, we were decommissioning machines. And the way we would decommission it is we would move the services, but the services there would be running still, right? Like we would in tandem. And then the minute we would do that for a period of time, and then we would turn off the services and let it run for a while, right? Where, oh man, it broke. Let's bring that back up online, right?
Sure,
like,
sure.
And then after a month, let's say, I don't remember the time frame, we would finally power down the machine, and then we would still wait a period of time. And so I had a server. It was the last server in this rack, and it had been off for like a month. And I mean powered down, but I had to put a change ticket in to say that I was removing it from the rack and everything else like that. And I put it in with like a low impact, unlikely to cause a problem type of thing. And the change control team called me in and said, "Hey, you got to come to the meeting on Wednesday." We had meetings on Wednesday morning. Mm-hmm. Not that's important. I realize like I'm clarifying, right? Not important. So I go into the meeting and they're like, "Kevin, we reviewed your ticket and we don't believe this is a low impact risk. Like we believe you've miscategorized this." I'm like, "No, man, it's machine's off. It's been off for a while. It's the only machine in that rack. It's not a big deal." And they're like, "No, Kevin, we believe there's the possibility of input." And then Nathan, I know you'll completely doubt that I said something dumb without thinking about it, right? I know you would never believe that would happen. And I said, "Yeah, you're right. There's a chance of an impact, right? I got to reach above my head to grab the server. I could stumble because I'm not very coordinated. I could fall through the rack because this is the last one there, so there's room. And if somebody had left the rack doors on the next row over open, I could stumble through, grab a wire, and unplug a production server, and that would have an impact." And they said, "Well, how would you fix that?" And I said, "Well, I would have a second person in the room verifying that all the rack doors were closed." And that became a required step, is that you had to have somebody else verify. Right. So theoretically,
people need to be tethered together so that if one falls, the other
you got to pull them back, right? You only let circus performers do your rack maintenance because they can do the flips and things necessary, not to unplug the other machines. I agree with you that it is possible that reputational damage could happen. Mm-hmm. But I would point out that we have decades of experience now, if not more.
Yeah.
That the compromise of an organization, because that's what I'm focused on, right? The compromise of an organization does not have a long-term impact on reputation.
Right.
The way they handle the breach can have an impact.
That might, sure.
Right.
Well, and I know we've talked about this enough. If you look at the statistics of like Target's market share or Home Depot's market share, right? Yeah. Like the impact, there's a massive, significant. You can see the drop in revenue immediately following it. You can see the drop in the stock prices and all this. But long term, as a function of growth, there's that dip is not significant. It's not even noticeable, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, people always argue about that, and they always point to the point in time and say, "Hey, look at the 6 months after," but they never look back and say, "Let's look at it over."
There's a stock dip, right? Like the stock price went down by 20%, so that's reputational harm. It's like, no, I long term, man, long term.
So let me approach it from a different perspective, because there's a lot of things that we do that it's just good to be cautious, right? Yes. Like, the likelihood of this small thing happening is so small, but just there's no reason to take the risk. That's kind of where I approach reputational harm. It's sort of like not talking on your phone or not answering a phone call or leaving your engine running while you're pumping gas, right? Like, I don't know if that's legit. There's all these rumors about, or what, checking your kid's candy. You brought that up on social media somewhere, right? Checking your kid's candy for drugs or razor blades or stuff like that, right? Like, the likelihood maybe non-existent, maybe it's never happened before, but it also doesn't hurt to like spread it out and make sure you get your fair share of the peanut butter cups or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yes. My point yesterday was not we shouldn't say to people, check to make sure the candy's good or things like that. My point was the widespread fear being
The FUD, yeah.
the FUD. How many police departments will post in the next 31 days or however many days? Okay, it's the 5th. Right? Like, how many police departments are going to post the bring the candy to the police department, we'll verify that it doesn't have edibles and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like, it's like it just doesn't happen.
How many people are buying drugs and saying, you know what, let's just give this. I spent all my money on this, but let me give it away to kids.
You know, I let me be very clear. I've never bought drugs. Well, okay, that's not true. I buy prescription drugs and like Excedrin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Excedrin is not a sponsor, but they can. So
You know, I knew when I got older that I would have to take vitamins. Probably, I never imagined my daily vitamin would be Excedrin.
yeah, I know. Oh man. My understanding is illicit drugs, even if they're not illicit where you live, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
They're not cheap. Like, this is not you're not buying a volume pack at Walmart of the crap candy that you can give out, right? You know, but
you go into your local drug deal and be like, hey, just what's the cheapest you got? Like, can I get like a grab bag of just whatever you got left over? Like,
right.
Just give it away. It's okay.
It's not going to be a problem because we're just going to stick it in the the Smarties, because Smarties are really just hardened cocaine anyway. Right? Oh man. So I don't know, man.
Another way of thinking about that. I've got my oldest just turned 14, and he has no concern about risk at all. Right? He's invincible. He can do anything. Nothing bad will ever happen because he's in control. And I've repeatedly had this conversation with him about sometimes we're cautious, not because everything is always going to work right, but what about the one time it doesn't work right? You know? And so, like, for instance, right before Christmas last year, we were on this tour of this facility, and there was a kind of a rock cliff that went down to a lake, and he was just being stupid, running really fast and kind of sliding on the gravel and whatnot. And he's like, I'm in control. I'm not going to go over the edge. Like, it's fine. And I'm like, yeah, but what if you do? What if the rock breaks? What if a tree limb falls and knocks you over because you're right on the edge? Right? Well, there's all these like things you can't control. The impact of that is massive. It's not just, oh, you fall and get hurt, probably wouldn't die, but we're going to spend the rest of the night in the hospital. And your mom and I are supposed to play in a Christmas orchestra program tomorrow. And we've been rehearsing this for 4 months. And all of a sudden, our critical parts aren't there because we're with you in the hospital. And now you run Christmas for 1,000 people. You know, it's like you don't get. I may exaggerate a little bit, but
I'm okay with that. It would ruin my Christmas if you guys weren't there.
Exactly, right? So I think that's where I come down with reputational harm is there are things that we should do and we should consider as, I can't quantify this, but it's just not a good idea. And the cost to address it is minimal. So why not?
Yeah.
But then when people try to sell it as a, hey, this is a reason you need to buy this tool or this thing, or, your hair's on fire. That tends to be FUD, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, and I think the right answer to these people is, okay, tell me why. Tell me, explain. Right? Like, give me the information. Give me this, right? And then let's evaluate that based on more information. The problem I see though too often is it's just, oh yeah, we have to fix that system because reputational harm will destroy us. No,
it could happen. Prove it won't. Prove it won't. I can't
prove a negative.
Exactly.
Right? But I can prove that you don't know how it's going to happen either. And if neither of the two people in the conversation know how it's going to happen, let's worry about real things.
Yeah. Right? Or at least quantifiable things. How about that?
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So. Cool. Awesome. Well, we've got 26 days left to figure out what kind of drugs we're going to put in our Halloween candy.
I don't. No. That is not how we want to end this show, right?
Razor blades? Is that what the plan was? Where are we going?
When I posted one of the people that responded to me, a guy I used to work with, great guy. He's like, in my day it was razors and apples. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I remember. When I was a kid, it was like,
apples for Halloween. How sad.
Oh, yeah, the crap houses gave us apples for Halloween. Like, let me be very clear. I didn't trick or treat my whole childhood.
Okay.
And in part was because my parents were so afraid of the bad people,
Bad people, yeah.
right? And it was always like, well, okay, I want the candy.
Right. I got you. Cool. Well, let's wrap it up. Tell us why we're wrong. We'd love to hear some feedback on the time that reputational harm totally destroyed your company.
Or explain to me why you like Comcast.
Well played. Well played.
Yeah.